The views and opinions expressed on America's Workforce Union podcast and its digital media channels are solely those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of the producers or sponsors.
Welcome to the America's Workforce Radio Podcast, the flagship production of the American Workers Radio and Podcast Network, where organized labor and its never-ending fight to protect the rights of the American worker come first. Now, presented by LIUNA, Laborers International Union of North America. Here's your host, Ed Flash Ferens.
Getting tough on wage theft. The Department of Labor gets a court order against 4 Washington-based restaurants. We're talking $750,000 in back pay. Meanwhile, the state of emergency in Bolivia and how it's affecting workers there. And today on the show, the latest from the North Coast Labor Federation and the National Labor Office of Blue Cross and Blue Shield. Welcome to the Wednesday, June 24th edition of America's Workforce, where we're available on at least 5 platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. We have a total of 3 guests joining us on the show today. We're going to kick things off in a few minutes with Pat Gallagher. Pat, longtime supporter of America's Workforce. On behalf of the North Coast Labor Federation, we're talking a federation that encompasses a number of unions in northeastern Ohio dealing with the Port of Cleveland and also the airport. And we're going to talk about maritime trades, the temporary suspension of the Jones Act. We're also going to talk about shipbuilding and how China is pretty much building almost all the ships in the world right now. And we have the capacity here to do it. We have the welders, we have the steel, but we're not doing it. Pat was also at the AFL-CIO National Convention in Minneapolis a couple of weeks ago, and he's going to talk about how excited the crowd was with a number of speakers, and one of them came from my union, SAG-AFTRA, talking about artificial intelligence and how a deep fake was presented several years ago where he was telling membership at SAG-AFTRA not to vote for a union contract. How about that? They basically took his likeness and changed his words. Scary times in America. Pat's going to talk about all of that as our first guest. Then we're going to be joined by 2 individuals on behalf of the National Labor Office of Blue Cross and Blue Shield. One of them is a regular. That's Merrilee Logue. She serves as executive director. She'll be joined by Lynn Pina. Lynn is the Chief Marketing Officer of Blue Cross Blue Shield Global Solutions. And what we're going to talk about is the importance of being prepared when you go on vacation, okay? You know, you have your budget for your vacation, you get all your ducks in a row, you take time off from work, but do you have proper health insurance outside of the country? You know, things can happen, and this happened to me personally a couple of years ago when we were in Mexico, and luckily I had extra insurance, which picked up the tab. My daughter, same thing. And I'll tell you, you never know what's going to happen in another country. You got to make sure. And this is a great conversation that you can take home to. So we'll be joined by, again, Lynn Pina, Chief Marketing Officer of Blue Cross Blue Shield Global Solutions, and Merrilee Logue, who is the Executive Director of the National Labor Office of Blue Cross and Blue Shield, one of the many proud sponsors of America's Workforce. We appreciate them. Now, a brief look into the world of labor. This segment brought to you by Boyd Watterson Asset Management. You can find more at boydwatterson.com. The Department of Labor has announced it has secured a federal court order requiring 4 Washington-based restaurants to pay $750,000 in back wages and damages to over 40 workers following an investigation into illegal practices under the Fair Labor Standards Act. Following the department's initial investigation, the restaurant owners, Noberto and Guillermina Rodriguez, agreed to pay back wages to 42 employees who were victims of overtime violations. The department then sought and was granted a court order to compel payment after the owners failed to make payments. Following the news, Wage and Hour Division Administrator Andrew Rogers said the following: disregarding the findings of a Wage and Hour Division investigation carries very serious repercussions. So I encourage employers to, on a regular basis, review their pay practices, reach out for compliance assistance, and immediately address those violations. So in this case, we're talking $750,000 in back wages and damages that's going to 42 employees. Hopefully this won't be taken to some appeals court. We'll see what happens. You know, last Friday, the president of Bolivia, Rodrigo Paz, declared a 90-day state of emergency. This is in response to a months-long conflict with labor unions and other opponents of the government. The declaration allows the president to deploy a wide range of military personnel to clear roadblocks and curb the right to protest. The protest, led by a coalition of trade unions, coca farmers, and indigenous groups, seek to prevent the Bolivian government from imposing austerity measures such as land reforms and the elimination of fuel subsidies. While the president has scrapped a number of more controversial policies and recently signed an agreement with the Bolivian Workers' Confederation, many other unions and indigenous groups remain committed to the action. Now, this includes groups aligned with the former president, whose Movement for Socialism party held power in Bolivia for roughly 2 decades before the current president won. That was last year. While the government has removed many of the highway and road barriers, creating widespread food and fuel shortages in major Bolivian cities, blockades still remain. Now, the Trump administration has been outspoken in its support for the current president, with Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth warning protesters. This is what Hegseth said, that the United States is watching. Secretary of State Marco Rubio also recently announced that the United States was ramping up emergency assistance and logistics operations in support of the current administration in Bolivia, which right now seems to be pretty much anti-worker. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Pat Gallagher on behalf of the North Coast Labor Federation.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
Are you an experienced mechanical insulator looking to take your career to the next level? Insulators Local 50 in Central Ohio has steady work for a number of years. Insulators Local 50 offers a total wage and benefits package that can't be beat. It's not just the competitive wages. Local 50 also provides medical, vision, and dental insurance with no paycheck deductions for you and your family. Don't miss out on the chance to secure your future. Join us at Insulators Local 50. Earn great pay and the best benefits. Visit insulators50.com/AWF50 to fill out the online form, and a Local 50 representative will call to begin the process. America's Workforce is presented by the Laborers International Union of North America. Feel the power right now at liuna.org. This segment of the show is brought to you by the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. For more information, please visit bmwe.org. Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies formed out of a need to provide affordable health care to teachers, to loggers, and miners. Back in 1965, the Blues developed the National Labor Office to strengthen its commitment to organized labor. Blue Cross Blue Shield's National Labor Office remains focused on America's workers, advocating for affordable and equitable health care, partnering with strategic alliances to provide industry-leading products and services, and proudly serving more than 18 million unionized workers, retirees, and their families. All working hard for America's working families, for the health of America. You can learn more by following them at Blue Labor on LinkedIn and X, formerly known as Twitter. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the United Steelworkers. You can find more at usw.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Communication Workers of America. You can find more at cwa-union.org. Founded in 1887, the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters represents the employees responsible for tirelessly constructing and maintaining the national rail system in America. For more than a century, the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees has proven they have what it takes to protect its members and meet the ever-changing challenges of the rail industry. Today, the BMWED continues to fight for job security, fair wages, better benefits, and safer, more modern work environments. For more information, please visit bmwe.org.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Farrens.
And remember, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast. AWF Union Podcast. Well, he may be retired from the Steelworkers Union, but he's still pretty active. Pat Gallagher is president of the North Coast Labor Federation, and he had the opportunity to go to the AFL-CIO convention a couple of weeks ago in Minneapolis. He's going to talk about that. But first and foremost, Pat, welcome back to the show. Thanks for joining us. Maritime trades and the Jones Act, and also the latest from the steel industry as far as when it comes to illegal dumping, things like that. So let's start off with the maritime trades, if you will. Go ahead.
Well, I had the privilege of attending the National AFL-CIO convention in Minneapolis. And in conjunction with that, they held the Maritime Trades Convention prior to the commencement of the convention. And it was a very good session, and we learned a lot. Talked a lot about the Jones Act waiver. You know, the Jones Act requires that all vessels moving cargo between U.S. ports are to be built in the U.S., owned by Americans, and crewed by U.S. citizens. Trump administration had, in March of this year, initially put a 60-day waiver. Now they extended that for 90 days, and it goes through mid-August. And the excuse was it was going to reduce energy costs and all that, which we know is not occurring. So we're kind of worried about what's going to happen in the long run to the Jones Act and the maritime trades. Also, too, it's interesting to note, too, that 5 unions, the United Steelworkers are one of them, filed a 301 trade case around shipbuilding. We know that 5,500 ocean-going vessels are Chinese flagged. The United States has 80. 90% of all the world's commerce is maritime. Mm-hmm. And 1% of that commerce is shipped by American ships. So definitely losing the dominance that we had on the seaways. And I think it's important that we keep our presence in the shipbuilding industry, and that's why we have the Ships for America Act, which is in Congress right now, and we need to bring back that cargo to American ships and rebuild our shipbuilding industry.
Let me ask you about the steel industry itself. And you and I had many conversations about the illegal dumping going on. And I know they're going to renegotiate this summer. They're going to renegotiate the USMCA, which is better known as NAFTA 2.0. Wondering where we stand with all that. I don't hear too much, but then again, that's why we're having this conversation. What do you know about it?
There's definitely been an effect on the steel industry with, import, and we're monitoring that very closely. We're hoping that we could get some kind of stricter protections in the new renegotiated NAFTA 2.0 or whatever you want to call the act, and hopefully we'll get a positive decision and positive clearance of the rules for steel dumping.
I know China, you mentioned China about shipbuilding, and they're so clever because, when we formed that agreement, well, they don't ship it directly to the United States. They went to Mexico, and then Mexico, it came to the United States. So they had problems there, and it's just ridiculous. I mean, it's a chess game, a very complicated chess game that's going on right now when it comes to international trade.
Yeah, we want the standard to be that for it to be considered American steel, it has to be melted and poured in the United States. That's what we need, is the criteria for it to be declared American steel.
There you go. And that can be done. We have the skilled workforce to do just that. All right, let's talk about the AFL-CIO convention. When you got back, you told me, man, this was a pretty good convention. I know you've been to a number of them. This one had a lot of energy. I did report that they want to organize. They decided that in the next 5 years, we got to get some more union brothers and sisters in the fold here to the tune of $2 million. I know that part. Maybe you can pick it up from there.
There was a goal to organize 2 million more members, and that's the goal of the AFL-CIO and all the affiliated unions. And it's something that everybody's really taking an approach on. Everybody's trying to work together in their industries and their core sectors, trying to get everybody organized, trying to get everybody involved. And we think it's very important, especially now with all the attacks on working people and, the challenges that we're going to face. One of the things that they had a presentation on was AI, and it was amazing what they can do with this AI and all this artificial intelligence. They had a deep fake that was from 2023, and then they had one from 2026, and it was 1,000,000% improved. They had one individual who was a representative for one of the actors' unions. I can't remember which one it was. And he had bargained a contract and was trying to get it ratified. And they had did a deep fake on him, saying that the contract was no good and vote against it. And he had nothing to do with it. And it was impossible to tell that it wasn't him.
So that's how good the technology is right now. I have to throw this at you because I know in your role in the North Coast Labor Federation, you do a lot to get out the vote, get people educated on the issues and the candidates, what they stand for. It doesn't matter who they are, what party they represent, Democrat, Republican, or an independent. My concern, and I would imagine it's everybody's concern, that these deep fakes and artificial intelligence is going to manipulate, especially the commercials, the platforms that certain candidates speak to. What are you hearing about that right now?
Well, they're trying to put controls on this, and especially for political campaigns, because somebody could put out a deep fake ad that's totally erroneous and not from the candidate or from somebody not even connected to either candidate. And it's, the technology is so rapidly advanced, and it's almost impossible to recognize these deep fakes now. So we need some government controls on these things to stop this from just rolling over the future and protect U.S. jobs. I mean, in the steel industry, for example, we've lost a lot of jobs to technology. And when we redid the basic labor agreement in the early 2000s, we included that any technological improvements, any equipment, we have to get advance notice on it, and we have the right to claim those jobs as union jobs. And we've been pretty successful at saving some of those jobs in the steel workers, and hopefully we can get that going and even get more protections to protected workers from this AI intrusions.
Going back to the convention in Minneapolis, it sounds, from what I've been able to pick up, and we're going to talk to Fred Redmond about it next week on the show. Fred, of course, a history with the steelworkers and now Secretary-Treasurer of the AFL-CIO. But do you feel that anybody that left the building was pretty much energized about moving forward, especially with the important political year that it is?
No, everybody recognizes the challenges that the labor movement's facing, and I think they're willing to approach those challenges. And I think everybody was energized and more determined than ever to try to, get our country going in the right path. We need to, correct some of these injustices that's been going on, and need to start making a workers first economy that works for all, not just for the 1%.
Amen to that, brother. Pat Gallagher, president of North Coast Labor Federation, one of the many proud sponsors here on America's Workforce. You take care. We'll talk to you next month. Okay, brother?
Thanks, Flash.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to link up with the National Labor Office of Blue Cross and Blue Shield. Once again, you're listening to America's Workforce.
This is America's Workforce. More shows available at awfradio.com.
It takes LIUNA to keep America running. Over 70,000 public employees are part of LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, delivering critical services such as healthcare and emergency response, as well as maintaining roads and sanitation systems. Even the National Postal Mail Handlers Union, representing over 47,000 U.S. postal workers, is affiliated with LIUNA. Find out what it takes for LIUNA to keep America running at liuna.org. That's LIUNA.org.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers. You can find more at ifpte.org.
America's Workforce Radio is sponsored in part by the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, District Council 6, representing painters, glazers, drywall finishers, and sign and display industry workers. They remind you that belonging to a union is your right as an American.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Iron Workers. You can find more at ironworkers.org.
There is unity and strength for workers.
We are the USW.
We are the USW.
The United Steelworkers.
The largest industrial union in North America.
We represent 850,000 members in the U.S., Canada, and the Caribbean.
We work in metals,
rubber,
chemicals,
paper,
oil refining,
atomic energy, and the service sector.
We are steelworkers, standing strong and fighting for what's right.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Heat and Frost Insulators Labor Management Cooperative Trust. Find out more at insulators.org/LMCT.
America's Workforce is sponsored in part by Boyd Watterson Asset Management, LLC. Find out more about our investment solutions tailored to meet the needs of Taft-Hartley funds at boydwatterson.com.
American workers are sick of struggling to get by. It's time to get ahead. In the Teamsters Union, workers are winning industry-leading contracts, historically high wages, fully paid health care, and retirement benefits you can count on. Across the country, Teamsters fight alongside our brothers and sisters to secure a better life. It's what we've been doing and how we've been living for more than a century. When we fight, we win. Join us. Be a Teamster.
Now, back to Ed Flash Ferens with America's Workforce.
And remember, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast, AWF Union Podcast. You know, Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies formed out of a need to provide affordable health care to teachers, to loggers, and miners. And back in 1965, the Blues developed the National Labor Office to strengthen its commitment to organized labor. Blue Cross Blue Shield's National Labor Office remains focused on America's workers, advocating for affordable and equitable health care, partnering with strategic alliances to provide industry-leading products and services, and proudly serving more than 18 million unionized workers, retirees, and their families, all working hard for America's working families, for the health of America. You can learn more by following them at Blue Labor on LinkedIn and X, formerly known as Twitter. You know, we are heading into peak travel season, and more union members than ever are traveling abroad. But while passports and itineraries are top of mind, healthcare planning often is not, even though it's an important part of being prepared for travel. Well, today, we are focusing on international travel and what it really takes to stay covered, prepared, and protected when you are outside of the U.S. Joining me is our longtime friend, Merrilee Logue, Executive Director of the National Labor Office at Blue Cross Blue Shield Association. Merrilee, welcome back to America's Workforce.
Thanks, Flash. It's such a treat to be with you and the team here at AWF Union Podcast. And this is really such an important topic for Americans' workers and their families. You know, travel should be exciting. It should be something people really look forward to. But just like you plan your route, your lodging, and your budget, it also makes sense to plan your health and well-being while you're away. So the good news is that travelers don't have to figure all of this out on their own. There are resources, tools, and support that can make it much easier to prepare before an international trip and to get medical help during a trip if needed. To help us walk through that, we're joined today by Lynn Pina, Chief Marketing Officer at Blue Cross Blue Shield Global Solutions. Hey, Lynn, welcome back.
Thanks, Merrilee, and hi, Flash. It's great to be back with both of you.
Well, hi, Lynn, and good to have you with us today. So let's do this. Let's start with the basics. When people are traveling internationally, what should they be thinking about from a healthcare standpoint?
Good question, Flash. The first thing to know is that healthcare abroad may work very differently from what you're used to here in the U.S. Even if you're traveling to a place that feels familiar or well-developed, you may still encounter a different healthcare system with different procedures and practices when it comes to getting and paying for care. So before any trip abroad, it's worth taking a few simple steps to prepare so your trip is easier and more enjoyable. That preparation really should start with understanding what type of health coverage you have abroad. For many union members traveling for work, training, or assignments, international coverage is often arranged through an employer or union-sponsored health plan. So check with your benefits manager to understand what coverage is available before you travel.
Well, Lynn, that's pretty helpful. And I think a lot of people assume, well, I have health insurance at home, so probably I'm fine abroad too. What do you say to that?
Well, that's a really good question and often one of the biggest misconceptions we see. A domestic health insurance plan often doesn't travel internationally in the way people expect it to. In some cases, there may be limited reimbursement options, which means you may have to pay upfront to receive care, something most of us just aren't used to here in the US. That's why it's really important for travelers to understand the difference between the coverage they have at home and the type of support that may be available to them when they're abroad. And that's where understanding the type of coverage you have becomes really essential. So for travelers heading abroad, you should confirm whether you have coverage for medical care outside the US, including support for accessing care and, in more complex situations, transportation to an appropriate facility. If that's not included in your current plan, it's worth considering a dedicated travel medical policy designed specifically for international travel. We often say if you need a passport, you need a travel medical plan.
Lynn, I also think it's helpful here to explain the distinction between travel insurance and travel medical insurance, because people hear those terms used interchangeably all the time.
Absolutely. They sound similar, but they serve very different purposes. Travel insurance is generally focused on protecting the financial investment in your trip. So things like trip cancellation, delays, interruptions, or lost luggage. Travel medical insurance, on the other hand, is focused on your health care. It's designed to help cover the cost of medical care while you're traveling abroad, and just as important, to help you access the right care and support.
Now, Lynn, when you say support, what does that look like in real life?
Well, Flash, support shows up in very practical ways, and it's often where people see the biggest difference. With travel medical plans, including those offered by Blue Cross Blue Shield Global Solutions, you're not left trying to figure things out on your own if you need care abroad. You have access to 24/7 support teams who can help you identify the right place to get care based on your situation, so not necessarily just the closest option, but one that's appropriate for the care you need. If the right level of care isn't available locally, those teams can also help you get to a more appropriate facility, even if that's in another country or back home. And just as important, these plans are designed to help cover the cost of that care and work directly with providers, so you're not left trying to manage unexpected or potentially significant medical costs on your own. There are also tools to make getting that care abroad easier. For example, a provider finder to help you find local doctors, hospitals, and clinics, and tools that give you the foreign equivalent for US medications. And for many travelers, language support is a big part of that experience as well. So things that help you translate medical information and ensure you have clear communication with local providers. So when we talk about support, it's really about helping you find, access, and pay for the right care and navigate that entire experience without unnecessary stress.
That ability to not only find care, but actually coordinate and pay for care is what really gives people peace of mind when they're traveling.
Great point, Merrilee. Peace of mind is what we all want when we go on vacation. No doubt about that. While you want to be prepared for just about anything, not every health issue while traveling is a major emergency. Now, for most people, it's the smaller, everyday issues that come up unexpectedly. So, Lynn, how should travelers think about that?
I'm glad you asked that, Flash, because most people are more likely to experience minor issues. Things that don't land you in the hospital, but they can certainly disrupt your plans and be harder to manage while you're in a foreign country. So for things like a stomach bug, food poisoning, a rash, a bite, even something simple like a headache or minor infection, services like global telemedicine can be really helpful. With travel medical plans like those from Blue Cross Blue Shield Global Solutions, you have access to telemedicine at no cost, so you can connect with the provider quickly wherever you are. You can get guidance and, in many cases, treatment or prescriptions where local laws allow it, without even having to leave your hotel or disrupt your plans. And because it's a global service, it's designed specifically for travelers, so the providers understand how to treat patients across different locations and systems. For many people, that's how they end up using the coverage, actually, not for a major event, but for something manageable that becomes much easier to handle because the support is already in place.
That's such an important perspective. This is really about preparation, not expecting something to go wrong. The goal is to help travelers feel informed and supported. In addition to making sure you have coverage for medical care abroad, there are a few more steps you can take to prepare for travel. Check recommended vaccines for the destination as part of your routine trip planning. Make sure you have enough medication for the full trip, plus a little extra in case there are delays. Keep medications in their original packaging and make sure they're in your carry-on. Have a copy of important health information, especially if you manage a chronic condition. Take a few minutes to understand how healthcare works in your destination, including where you would go for care and how the system operates. We have helpful country-specific healthcare guides on the website that walk you through this. These are simple, practical steps that can really make a big difference.
And I can only imagine that's relevant not just for vacations, but for work travel too?
Yes, definitely, Lash. When people hear international travel, they often think of leisure trips. But there are many union members whose travel may be connected to work, training, or assignments. For example, some workers may be based in the U.S. but travel to Canada or Mexico for business-related purposes. Others may travel in groups for conferences, programs, or short-term assignments. And there are also longer-term international assignments, what we often call expatriate assignments, where someone may be living and working abroad for 6 months or more. In those situations, having the right type of global health coverage and support becomes even more important, because the needs for a short-term trip and a long-term assignment can be very different.
That makes a whole lot of sense. So if someone listening today is planning international travel sometime this year, what's the simplest takeaway you want them to remember?
Well, Flash, I'd say this: make healthcare planning part of your travel planning. Just as you would research your destination, take a few minutes to understand what support and coverage you'll have if you need medical care abroad. With a travel medical plan that offers the kind of support we've talked about here today, you can focus less on the what-ifs and more on enjoying your trip.
That's a great way to put it, Lynn. Travel really should be enjoyable, and having the right information and support simply just helps people feel more confident and prepared. At Blue Cross and Blue Shield, and through the National Labor Office, we're committed to helping America's workers and their families better understand their options to make informed decisions about their healthcare coverage, whether they're at home, on the road, or traveling abroad.
Excellent point, Merrilee. And it comes at the perfect time. This year, this is cool, we have an extra week of summer, thanks to how Memorial Day and Labor Day fall on the calendar. And that does not happen again until 2037. So it's a great year to make the most of those travel plans. We'd like to thank Merrilee Logue, Executive Director of the National Labor Office of Blue Cross Blue Shield Association, and Lynn Pina, Chief Marketing Officer at Blue Cross Blue Shield Global Solutions, for joining us and sharing practical tips, and I mean practical tips, for traveling smarter this summer. So if you're planning an international trip, remember, a little preparation goes a long way. So until next time, safe travels, everyone. And that'll be it for yet another edition of America's Workforce. Tomorrow, the heat and frost insulators. Until then, all of you have a safe and wonderful day.
That concludes another episode of the America's Workforce Radio Podcast. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. America's Workforce is a production of Labor Tools and BMA Media Group. Find out more information online at labortools.com.